My name is Nancy Sullivan, and I am a science educator, and I've been a science educator for over 20 years. And I have a question about your novel related to this aspect of myself, being an educator, which is what role does physics and maybe science in general play in your novel?
It actually plays a pretty big role. My main character, Ellen, is a wannabe theoretical physicist. She ends up going back to school after being a single parent and studies physics, and she can't go as far as she wants to. So she ends up being a high school teacher of physics. But really, what she does is she uses physics to help her negotiate this idea of the truth. And she's particularly interested in the golden age of physicists when quantum mechanics was worked out, and in particular with Niels Bohr and the people that were around him at that time, all of them who would go on and to be part of the foundation of nuclear physics. And so she's looking at both the contradictions of this idea of science developing or giving us hard truths, absolute answers that we can depend on, and how quantum mechanics and quantum physics shook that up, and now things were probabilistics, and now there was a possibility of multiple answers to a problem. And also in terms of the theory that developed outside of that, which theoretical path you followed, hinged a lot on belief systems, like beliefs that you had about the nature of the world, and et cetera, and even epistemological concerns. And then she's also interested in Bohr as a contradiction as a person, a deeply humane man who also would be fundamental or part of the creation of a bomb, as were several other physicists just like him, who were both humanitarians involved in a whole array of good works in their lives, but also heavily involved with the creation of the first nuclear bomb through the Manhattan Project. So that's the way that science is really involved with Ellen's story. She's fascinated with it, and she is using it to work out her uncertainties about a truth, and also to arrive at a much more empowered sense of the truth that's centered in just her own knowing.
Is there an element of her being an educator that is relevant to this question?
Absolutely. I think as being an educator, she's always, I mean, she's interesting in that she's super interested in the narratives of science. So she uses that a lot in her classroom, and that gets her into some trouble with with a new principal. And sometimes her students find that a bit weird and quirky. But I think that being a scientist and being an educator means you're always being curious, and that you're interested also in cultivating that interest in the minds of other students. She's particularly interested in seeing her female students go on in physics, because that's one of those areas where could still use more women in that area for sure. So she, as an educator, that is part of her passion. She wants to see more women be excited about it, and in her own frustration of being able to go on, had something to do with being a mother, starting late in life, and all of those things, in the way that education at that time isn't particularly easy on, wasn't always particularly easy on women. So that's part of her story for sure.
That I think that's the part that I'm most interested in following in your novel is, as a science educator, how that notion of science goes beyond the classroom, because I think that's a really exciting idea. And as an educator myself, that's been my focus. So I'm really excited to see how you use the notion of science to kind of elucidate this other story.
Yeah.
So I really look forward to that. That sounds exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's her language, right? That's her language of negotiating with the world and understanding the world. And yeah, I loved that part. I loved that part of the book of writing it and researching and thinking about it. So thank you. Thanks for your question, Nancy.
You're welcome.